Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another live session. Glad to be here. Good to see you all. My name is Tomek, and I'm a teacher here on Inside Tamer. I'm also a scientist. For those of you who are joining for the first time in this live session. So as always, I want to give a minute or two for you to join in and to introduce yourself and say your hellos. And hello Suba, hello Judy, hello Nima, hello Monica. Good to see you all here. Hello Caroline, hello Sharon. I really love this part when we come in and introduce ourselves and maybe raise your hand if you're here for the first time. And I always invite those of you who are here on a regular basis, my regulars, to welcome those of you who are here for the first time. We are here to learn, but also to enjoy yourself and to have a joyful experience. That's what those events are for here on Inside Timer. And today, very important topic, reconciling ego and soul. Something that I've been working with myself for a long time. And I want to ask you, how is your struggle, because this struggle for me, to reconcile those two seemingly opposite qualities? This is going to be a topic for today. Hello, Al from Pennsylvania, being here for the first time. Caroline says, having problem with the sound, may have to catch this later on YouTube. I'm sorry to hear. Usually it helps when you restart your device and come back. So if that's the case, please do. But I know that for some of you, this has been the case simply because it is technology, and technology tends to be elusive sometimes, and sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't. I know that the team of Inside Timer makes their best effort to make sure that those live events are uninterrupted. But unfortunately, it is what it is, and sometimes it fails. Yes, Monica says there have been a lot of updates. I know they've been working really hard on keeping this app up to date. Hello, Etu. Good to see you all. Philomena, Ash, first time. Samber, also first time. Suba joined us from Mumbai, India. Good to see you here. So, how have you been, guys? How's everything? Anything to report? Anything that you wish to share with all of us? Hello, Rita from Goa. Hello, Elizabeth from Miami. Good to see you. Oh, hello, Dan. Good to see you here, tuning in from Melbourne. I know Nima also tunes in from Melbourne, so we have a couple of Melburnians here. Hello to guest from Los Angeles. Good to see you all here. Okay, so we may as well jump in. Sember says personal issues. Yeah, this is something that we definitely will touch upon today, because reconciling ego and soul brings a lot of tension or friction, if you will. And this is the topic for today's session. So the reason I have chosen this topic for today is because a wonderful conversation I had with my patrons around 2 weeks ago on this very topic. And it seemed that a lot that happens in our lives is a result of ego personality and the soul personality coming together. And as I said, this may create a lot of friction, which we perceive or experience in our life as suffering. But my objective today is to show you that ego and soul are not necessarily two different identities, or maybe they are. But my objective today is to show you how they can come together in union and where does it come from. And to start off with, I want to read to you an excerpt from a book that inspires me, or has been inspiring me for a long time. And this is the reading. The excerpts come from a book by John Davis, The Diamond Approach. Both psychological and spiritual teachings are concerned with the nature, purpose, and role of the personal self. Psychodynamic approaches promote the development of an integrated, stable, coherent, and enduring ego, and see pathology as stemming from the failure to develop a healthy ego or personal structure. Cognitive psychologists might describe a similar goal as an integrated and realistic self-schema. On the other hand, spiritual systems generally emphasize the need to transcend this sense of self. From the point of view of most spiritual perspectives, suffering results, at least in part, from identifying with the ego. Some transpersonal psychologists suggest a sequential view. The ego must first develop and then transcended, as you move developmentally from personal to transpersonal levels of personality development. This view is expressed in the aphorism, "You must be somebody to become a nobody." This is accurate in the sense that the permanent transcendence of ego requires a stable ego structure and an integrated, coherent sense of self. However, if this is misunderstood, it can seem that spiritual awakening requires the loss of being your own person. Then, being personal and autonomous seem to run counter to spiritual realization. After becoming somebody and then nobody, a new question arises. How can you be yourself while being nobody? So, how can you be yourself while being nobody? I know for a fact that so many of you come to Insight Timer and to this session recognizing that you are spiritual beings. And I'm sure that you recognize in this process that your personality very frequently gets in the way of your fulfillment, of your happiness, if you will. So the trend that we observe today, after we recognize that what ego personality does, it puts us constantly puts our fulfillment and happiness in jeopardy. We started, all spiritual seekers, so to speak, throwing the ego away, trying to transcend it, forget about it, disconnect yourself from it. But what I invite you today to consider is to not throw the baby with the bathwater and actually recognize ego as something that is absolutely necessary, as John Davis suggests, to develop sense of self. So perhaps ego and soul are not, after all, so different. Last time I looked in the mirror, I saw only one person. A person that is capable of both being greedy, upset, angry, as much as being selfless, compassionate, empathetic. It almost depends on the circumstances which one resurfaces. And as is being suggested in the book, we have two contradicting, the problem or the issue flows from the fact that we have two contradicting systems of philosophies. On one hand side, we have our ego personality that is emphasized through our education, through our upbringing. We need to make money, we have to pay bills, we have to live in this world, we have to be realistic. But at the same time, that's the ego personality. And that's what being taught at schools, at work. That's what we believe it's necessary to become or be a good member of the society. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. Because indeed, as the text suggests, there is a validity in developing strong sense of self. However, what I invite you to consider is that the end of the road? Why is it that simply by focusing on ego, it is difficult to become fulfilled and live life of meaning? And many people have tried. Many people succeeded. Many people focused on ego qualities, which is possession, greed, money, power, control. These are qualities that for many spiritual seekers are considered negative. But let's look at it again. What is wrong with all those qualities? What are the ego qualities reflected in the soul? So on one hand side, we have focus on the self and the qualities. That's what ego does. Healthy, developed ego focuses on the self, protection, survival, security. But we know for a fact that this represents, on a larger scale, the qualities that are in development. So we may start there, but in order to, once the security and safety is fulfilled, we know that we want something else. As if ego qualities have to be transcended, or better word, integrated on the way of evolution into something bigger. And usually we receive those callings as, again, I'm using the word spiritual seekers. I consider myself a spiritual seeker in the sense that it is difficult for me to settle just for for fulfillment of the basic needs. If you know Abraham Maslow, when his pyramids of needs, at the bottom it is the belonging, and it is the basic needs that needs to be fulfilled in order for our physical body to function. But as soon as we get over or get beyond, and all those basic needs are being fulfilled, very soon we have that urge or need for something bigger, more expanded, higher. And I dare to say that every time I feel those urges that I clearly recognize as ego identity, I ask myself a question: are those qualities somehow, some way resemble what my soul actually needs? Is it possible that all those qualities of the ego try to emulate, so to speak, all those things that we truly crave for? Compassion, love, inclusiveness, as opposed to me and mine, recognition that we all one. Not in the sense that, in that fluffy sense that we say that we all belong together and there's no problem. No, simply something that even has been recognized in business. that running your business on your own and focusing on the individual is not as effective as working together collaboratively on a project. So maybe I want to ask you and hand it to you just for a moment. How do you see in your own personal life and maybe professional life the friction between the ego or the personality or something that is expected of you, as opposed to those deeper, more quote unquote spiritual desires and fulfillment? How does it show in your own life? I know this is a difficult question, so I give you a minute to answer. But it is a nature of those sessions that I want to invite you to discussion, and I want to give you a chance to express yourself and have a conversation with me, so we can challenge our own beliefs in order to have a better understanding of life as is. Because I believe that life as is a result of ego identity as much as the desires to fulfill those qualities that are being considered as soul qualities. Brandy says it causes a war in my mind. I very much resonate with that. For me, ego shows up as an irritability with others and with self. It's very interesting. Jenny says it confuses me trying to identify it. I think that's actually a good point that Jenny brings up, because in order to actually reconcile ego and soul, the first and the most important ingredient in this work is awareness. As in every meditation practice, the purpose of it is to bring awareness to what is. And in my work, the way I try to understand and work with reconciling ego and my spiritual qualities is through bringing first and foremost awareness to what is happening within me, with my thoughts, with my emotions, with my feelings, and try to understand whether those feelings, those emotions are in line with my values or value fulfillment that come from the quote-unquote soul level. Does it really bring me closer to be fulfilled, at peace, content, or rather reigns havoc in my life, as it happens with those unevolved qualities of the ego? Because I think that's one of the points that we all try to understand and make, that ego as is not a structure that is bad in itself and something that we try to get rid of, but something that we try to integrate with all those things that we desire, that contribute to the fulfillment of our values, something that we want. There are so many questions. Let me just... Brandy says, me too. I just want to disregard the whole idea of egos. But Brandy, do you try to disregard and discard the idea that ego exists? Or would you rather take your ego identity and throw it away? Which is a very important question if you consider reconciling those two things. Al says, not sure, but seems like ego comes to surface during strife, maybe it's stress, because that will make sense. Indeed, if you think about ego structures and all those layers that are around us, you may consider a positive aspect of the ego identity that again tries and does a very good job at protecting us in the times of stress and times when challenges appear on the horizon. But again, the moment that those challenges disappear, we still are trapped in sometimes, or very frequently actually, in the ego identity. And that what causes a friction, even though we want to, the all danger and stress and anxiety disappeared, we still seem to live and abide by those rules of ego identity and false belief systems. Judy says, one doesn't want to seem stuck on myself as being better than others. And again, Judy, this is a wonderful point because ego recognizes itself as a basic starting point to journey further. And I don't believe there's anything wrong with that. However, as we journey further and evolve, we recognize this is not end of the story. And we start recognizing others around us. And we want to communicate with others because that's where the growth is. And then, for a moment, we do not have to forget about ego qualities and the fact that sometimes we act in an egoic way. We simply try to transcend the ego qualities and apply them or expand them to include others. Alvaro asks, do you think that reconciling ego and soul, I must have to create rules? That's an excellent question. Personally, I do not think that creating rules, once and for all, rules that are there forever, is the best way. But having a discipline with your awareness to examine those qualities that you desire and then integrate them. That's what is more important. So if you need to create a rule that again make you more disciplined in a sense at first, it's a great thing, but you must recognize that a rule that worked at first might not necessarily be applicable for the rest of your life. And then you might recognize through awareness, developing awareness of what's working for you, you might recognize that some rules that have played a purpose in the past are no longer serving you, and maybe developing new rules supported by your spiritual discipline would be more appropriate in that particular time. Sue says, it is difficult to take notice of my ego without feeling selfish. That is interesting. And I think from the ego perspective, or from the spiritual perspective, you have to ask yourself, is it really a bad thing to be selfish? Are there times that being maybe not selfish, but self-centered, a positive thing? Let me remind you an example of that being reminded every time we get on a plane, and particularly moms with children. In the case of emergency, when the oxygen masks dropped out of the ceiling, even though you love your children, you should put mask first on yourself and then on your children. Not because you are selfish, because that sometimes you have to think about your well-being first before you can help others. So this is a very good point in our discussion, that ego identity and healthy ego development, it is important, as John Davies suggests, in our life. Sadika, I feel like I've been brought up with the focus of inner fulfillment and serving others, which I love and do feel content about. But I feel like I'm lacking I'm lacking the practicality of achievement and financial independence. I don't have the drive in me, but I feel like it is necessary to shift thinking, conditioning regarding the value of material things and worldly achievements. I absolutely love that comment from Sadika, because it is nothing wrong from setting yourself goals. It is nothing wrong from achieving. Also, possessing money and having money that, well, meet the conditions of your survival and make security in your daily life possible. It is absolutely desirable quality. Being a spiritual person does not mean that we must be naive and simply give up all of our possession. And this might sound a very, from the spiritual point of view, well, being attached to things is certainly a burden, maybe in the way of our spiritual development. But we're talking about healthy development of the ego. And what happens at first, for me, for instance, as I develop throughout my life, I recognize that certain attachment to certain things creates a resistance in me. And every time I try to go traveling, I have to simply take care of so many different things. So I've realized on my own that possession plays a role in my life, but there's a time in my life that possession holds me down. But this is something that you have to develop through experience, right? You have to have the ego quality of possessing in order to transcend this and recognize that although there's nothing wrong with the possession and achieving and having goals and having financial stability, you must recognize where this become a problem. And many of the spiritual seekers started from the position of prosperity. They achieved the success they were craving for. But they've realized that the ego identity that has to be transcended took home in the reality to the extent that there was no room for development of those soul qualities, right? So all those initial qualities that can be transcended and can be a platform to develop fulfillment, peace, and happiness, where actually we stuck. And that's what happens to so many of us. We basically are stuck in the ego identity and then may forget that there's something beyond that. So thank you, Sadika, for making that comment. I think it's very valid to recognize that a healthy sense of egos, and particularly the awareness of ego identity, it's not only good for your development, but also essential because it allows us to recognize things that are beyond just those basic ego qualities. Brandy says, hell yeah, I'd love to use it as a protection like in an argument, but I find it's so hard to balance the ego soul and end up going from one intensity to the next. Something balance would make a life worth living for me. Brandy, this is a great, thank you again, great comment and great point. This is something that I mentioned at the very beginning. The reason for this whole session is to understand and help you understand and help me understand how there's a friction or perceived friction between something that we consider as two separate identities, ego and soul. And very often, rather than trying to seamlessly move and transcend one and incorporate it within the other, we struggle and we go between one and the other. And I can tell you from my own life, it is so often that I simply cannot be in the middle. I either meditate or I am angry. And because of those two qualities that are within me, within one person, that's where so much suffering is coming from. So what I'm trying to do with myself, rather than resisting one and craving the other, I try to understand where one is coming from and how transcending the qualities of the ego personality help me to actually understand my true self, that in fact is combination of both. Because we live in a physical world, we cannot operate simply from the lacking understanding of the basics of life. Like Sadhika said, trying to help others and being selfless and being altruistic. It is a very important quality, but we cannot and must not forget of our own fulfillment, because that's where the energy comes from, to help others. And eventually, as we transcend one and the other, we see that there was no discrepancy. There was no difference between one and the other. Simply the qualities that we started off with were the starting point for the exploration. And then once again, we look in the mirror and you see one person. And it is something of a relief that we no longer need to strive to be either spiritual person and abandon all the ego qualities, or stay egoistic and being afraid that we never achieve enlightenment or fulfillment of life that usually is contributed to the ego quality. Dan asks, what does a healthy ego look like? That's a very good question. And I cannot speak for everybody else, but this is a question I'm asking myself all the time. Healthy ego, to me, is a balance between the initial or starting qualities which I started with, which is, possession or greed, and see in my own experience, very important thing, everybody is different, and I cannot give examples for you what's worked for you. What works for me is to recognize those ego qualities in the experience, in my interaction with others, and see and trying to understand what is the benefit of acting based on the ego qualities I have. So how does it make me feel when I'm a passionate beach volleyball player? And how does it make me feel when I focus purely on myself without helping my partner on the court? What is the result of the game? And very frequently, I find that I focus purely on my anger, for instance, without forgetting about my partner. I end up losing a game and being even more in distress. However, when I recognize the presence of my partner and recognize the certain emotions in me, for instance, anger, I can transcend this quality and say anger is simply an energy that can be transformed and transcended in this particular situation to use and to make me be more energetic in the game. And that's something that works for me very often to my benefit. But again, if I only use anger as a starting point, and if I only focus on that initial quality without understanding that this can be transcended and serve my purpose, or my soul purpose, or higher purpose, then obviously I would end up even more stressed and I would lose the game. Sharon, perhaps the ego gives us our individuality. However, we need to manage it and not forget the oneness and interconnectedness between us. That's a very good point. Hence, reconciling the two. Without ego, we may not be able to have the unique experience that this would bring. So this is a very good point, and something that I want to suggest to all of you is the fact that the initial ego qualities gives us a clue through the application or through applying awareness. What are the qualities of the ego? Because my experience, at least, is that all the qualities that I experience in my daily life, my experiences that come from the ego identity, try to emulate something that soul quality already possesses. So although we start in a point of greed, possession, power, and control, we must, through our own experience, through applying awareness to our own experience, must recognize that this is only a stop towards evolution and in our development. In the same way as, for instance, when you look at babies, how they develop. They must develop sense of self first before they start recognizing even something so simple as the parents. That's why you would not call on the baby selfish. This is simply a natural part of the human development. And recognizing ego as a part of the human development is a stepping stone in transcending it and growing above it. Not as in discarding it and removing it from your life, but simply reconciling it with those qualities towards which we strive. Brandy, I feel that so deep in my soul, I try to picture the plain scenario, and honestly believe if I wasn't with someone I loved or made a connection with someone on the plane to save, I think I would just accept the end and let it happen. How do you fix that? Do I really even need to? And this is another great example, because that's where healthy sense of ego identity helps. In the plain scenario, maybe on the soul level, you would jump to help others. But we know for a fact that in actually using the quality of the ego, the reasoning indicates that in this particular situation, putting oxygen mask on yourself and saving yourself before helping others is the right thing to do. So once again, you do not need to get rid of the ego. You don't need to forget about it or see it as an obstacle in your development. You see it as a stepping stone that you can use with awareness for your own purpose. So thank you for bringing that up. Yolanta, would you say that ego qualities are more tangible and soul will be intangible, where it feels that ego will stay behind us and so will take with us as we depart from physical life to new dimension of our energy existence? This is a very good question, and I think something that we all, as spiritual seekers, ask ourselves: Is this physical existence only a temporary vessel that we try to get rid of and move on? Or is it, which again seems to me as a very important lesson that we are here to learn before departing into the non-physical state? By reading many literature about out-of-body experiences and non-physical existence, the consensus seems to be that human experience, an experience of the ego qualities, an experience of the human experience, is a very valid one as we transcend it, and that's why we are here. It is almost, someone said, that it is a privilege, in a sense, to be a human and to be able to experience it, because it is an amazing lesson for us to learn here before we again depart into non-physical states of existence. So that's how I think. That's what drives me through this life, and that's what my motivation every time I find myself struggling with this human existence, when I think to myself, it is too hard, it's not worth it. It'd be so much better to just let go of everything and just move to the next stage. But it seems like if you struggle right now at this stage, physical stage of your existence, it is very likely that the non-physical will just continue to challenge you in the same way. But again, this is my understanding of this topic, and I don't want to obviously tell you that this is the ultimate truth. Ultimately, it is for you to reconcile those both worlds: physical, non-physical, ego and soul. Sadika asks, can our ego be underdeveloped then on the hand? Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that our ego can be juvenile. We can imagine yourself behaving right now in the same way as when you were 5 or 6 years old. At that stage, you already started developing ego, which was juvenile. And in the process of growing up, you start recognizing what qualities serve you. What qualities make you feel fulfilled, at peace, and so on and so forth. So in the same way as we start integrating the soul and non-physical kind of qualities in our life, I think in the same way we have to work on developing healthy ego identity. And as John Davies suggests, this is in part a big role of psychologists to point you out towards a healthy ego development. However, in that process, in that work of developing healthy ego, we cannot forget that this is only a stepping stone towards something that is more expansive. And I think, once again, something that we start recognizing here as human beings right now on this part of the history, that we are more than just a physical body. Rob Monroe, a famous consciousness explorer, has this famous affirmation that he states that we are more than our physical bodies, and we are more than this physical matter, and we can recognize more than this physical materiality. But again, in order to recognize that, you have to develop a healthy ego. You cannot just simply be in non-physically or connected with your non-physical senses, because you are, after all, for reason, in this physical reality that recognizes these qualities that we consider ego identity. Al, what is the biggest hindrance for us to evolve from ego-centered to a higher self? I think the biggest hindrance is opposite to the biggest or the most important quality, and it is awareness. One thing that I always invite my mentees and my students and invite you to do is to work on your awareness. Every meditation practice that I know of focuses on deepening your awareness, because having your awareness expands your understanding of what is happening and expands on the experience that you're having and help you choose that experience that you're having based on the behavior, based on the quality that you choose to embody. This awareness helps you to choose better later what is good for you, what serves your purpose better. And without awareness, and that's the problem. That we see so much in this world, that we actually are afraid of being aware. We used social media, we used streaming services, we use everything to numb ourselves from being aware. Because very often when we are aware, we're experiencing all those qualities that makes us sad, makes us unfulfilled. And we forget that in order to transcend the unfulfillment, sadness, misery, and anxiety, we first have to use our awareness to recognize them and understand that they do not serve us. So in the challenge that we encounter, in the problem that we see, or as they say, problems becomes a part of the solution. And without recognizing one, we cannot actually transcend it and when we achieve the next level. Quote from Don Eldon, "The journey is the destination." This is very true. The journey into awareness is the destination itself. So yeah, that's a good one. Sue says, "I think the human existence is also very beautiful. I have a wonderful daughter, and I'm very proud of her. That is a beautiful part of physical existence to me." Absolutely. And as Sue beautifully notices, that creating connections with other human beings and cherishing that interaction is the reason why we're here. And I always think to myself that, particularly when it comes to, I can imagine that the experience of Sue, and interaction with her daughter sometimes can be challenging. But we know that it is easy to overcome those challenges because we know that, again, on the soul level, in the greater scheme of things, this is a very positive thing and helps us to grow and to expand for the greater good. Because the interaction, I can imagine that interaction with your daughter overall, it's a beautiful journey. And developing that relationship is one of the best things that can ever happen to anyone. The relationship between parent and daughter or sons. Maybe last one before we conclude this one. I've been surrounded by some of the ugliest egos my entire life. How can I fight fear that I'll end up being the same? I've gone my whole life hating egoistical people and ensuring I don't become that. How can I be a healthy amount of aware in being able to create an ego, hard standing up for myself when I don't even want to be a self, Brandy, very good point. And I can bring another example from my own life. As perhaps every son, I have father issues. And I always, throughout my life, trying to not be like my father and try to do everything to do opposite to my father did. And this seems like a good example what you're experiencing, trying to escape the qualities of others that you perceive as negative and not serving you. And the fact that you recognize those very qualities in others is a stepping stone into transcending them. Because imagine yourself if you did not have awareness what you try to get away from. Without that awareness, you would simply be not able to overcome them. So awareness of all those egos around you show you clearly what is not working for you. And it is valid example of what you need to transcend, not in them, but into yourself, in yourself. Because it goes without saying, the only reason why you can recognize those qualities in others is because you experience them in yourself, right? Because if you didn't have that ego identity within you, how could you possibly recognize them? And this is not a bad thing. That's what I tried to say throughout this talk. This is actually a fundamental positive thing to help you to move from one level to another, not by throwing it away, but incorporating it into your healthy ego identity and overall into the self personality that consists in well-balanced ego and soul qualities that both can be used differently at different times. It is up to you. It is your choice how to use them in a balanced way that serves your purpose, your higher purpose. Rachel, what do you say about a vulnerable empath under my parents' roof at 26 years of old? They help and care a lot, but also overprotective at times. Rachel, thank you very much for sharing that. I sympathize with you. I sympathize with you because, quite frankly, as much as I love my parents and recognize their role in my life, the first thing I did when I became financially stable, I moved out. Because it is important. It is important to recognize, and this is actually a good point in our discussion, that even though we might love someone and care for someone, appreciate them, we also recognize that there's a time when you have to move out. And you, again, developing a healthy sense of ego includes developing boundaries, right? So that would be very much an part of the healthy ego rather than the soul quality. Developing a healthy boundaries, which we know how important they are in order to live happily and healthy in the physical reality, right? So this is another very good point in the discussion, and I hope that helps. And let me just say, I very much sympathize with you because I know how it feels. Maybe not exactly. I don't know the exact experience, but certainly I have a heart feeling and sympathize with you on this one. Al, is our ultimate goal to unite our ego with the soul? And this is a very good question, which I believe you have to answer for yourself. But what I suggest in this talk, which kind of gives an answer to your question, I try to reconcile ego and the soul. As in, I try to transcend the ego qualities by allowing myself to healthy experience them and learn from them, and on the way to encompass it as a one healthy personality. Thank you, Angie, for your very, very kind support. Guys, we are coming to an hour of this wonderful session. Thank you for all your questions and your absolutely amazing contribution. I wish we had more of talks like that, and I wish I could see you in person and hear your voice and hear you asking those questions yourself, because I think this is a very important topic and something that a question that we recognize and ask ourselves these days more than ever. This is the time of history. This is the time of history where transcending the ego qualities is also important if we wish to live a fulfilled and peaceful life. And that's what I'm working on currently with myself. And thank you for being part of this journey. Thank you for all your kind words. And as I tried to point out, I have quite a bit of experience by applying awareness to all those ego qualities that have been wreaking havoc in my own life. And hence, I created a mentoring program that is accessible here on Inside Timer that very much works with this very topic. So there are 4 steps and 4 goals in this mentoring program. First one is to improve your awareness, and by improving your awareness, help you develop your ideal identity. This is very much what we're talking about here. Developing healthy ego identity, again, healthy in order and integrated with all the qualities that we call spiritual, the soul qualities, is one of the most important steps in my mentoring program. And this starts with awareness. This starts with paying attention to what is happening in your life. And this is not always easy. I recognize that. And hence I offer help to everyone who's willing to accelerate that journey of developing a healthy ego identity and your ideal identity, so to speak. And along that way, once you apply awareness into and start recognizing what your ideal identity might be, that helps you to maximize your talents and potentials. Because being more yourself, your integrated self, that's where you start shining. That's where all those talents and potentials come to the surface. Whilst in the opposite scenario, when you feel stressed, anxious, and suppressed, simply there's no room for your talents and potentials to be explored or expanded. And that obviously, as a part of the program, it requires certain changes. We cannot simply repeat the same mistakes and expect that our life will change. So there's a simple saying that goes like that: changing nothing changes nothing. And I believe that making adjustments in order to achieve those goals, it is an important part of the journey. And again, in my mentoring program, that's what I try to do. And ultimately to live life that is enjoyable and fulfilling as possible. In integrated way, where all the qualities of our personality have freedom to be expressed. One of the other things I want to mention at the end of the session is many of you, and thank you for that, mentioned how much you like my meditations, and certainly I excel in creating guided meditations. And part of my offering, I've realized, again, that's something I didn't know myself. I just recognized that based on your feedback that I received over many, many years on Inside Timer. And I thought that since you like my meditations so much, and so many of you do, one part of my offerings is to offer you personal guided meditation, which is part of my mentoring program. So we sit together, I listen to your story for about 10 minutes, and then we sit to meditation, which I record and then edit and give it back to you. So you end up having a very personal guided meditations that we experience together. And last but not least, of my offerings is to offer you meditation teachings. So meditation offering includes developing a practice that will help you on the path of developing larger or expanded awareness of things. Meditation, it's a wonderful tool to explore and expand your awareness. But I know for myself, I spent 15 years meditating, and I still find that my practice is lacking. And I wish sometimes I had someone to help me with it. And now, overcoming all those obstacles and knowing by heart the pitfalls of the meditation practice, I offer my help for you to develop your meditation practice faster, to make your meditation practice more robust and applicable to all the life situations and all the life challenges that you're experiencing right now, perhaps. Yes, there's a saying that truth will set you free. And there's also the second part of this saying, the truth will set you free, but before that will piss you off a lot. And I think this is something that I want you guys to know, that on the soul level, it's all about truth, but you also have to recognize that along this process, you may get upset a bit, but this is all for good purpose. And if you wish to hear more from me on this topic and others, please do follow me on Insight Timer, where there are so much of free content published, and just subscribe or follow and click the notification button, which changes all the time with the new versions of the app. So please follow me there. I also have a circle that you're always welcome to join. I have YouTube channel on which you can watch a recording of most of my live events. I have a Patron website, which is a very important one because this allows you to get an access to exclusive content, but most importantly to weekly sessions with me. So we have a small inner circle group of friends at this stage after, I believe, 2 years, that we meet on a weekly basis and we discuss all those topics via Zoom, which again allows you to ask those questions in person, which is very, very important. Again, if you wish to stay tuned, you may go to my website, subscribe to my mailing list, or even contact me through Insight Timer and messages. Send me a message there. Whatever is more suitable to you. But right now, I want to thank you for this amazing session. I want to wish you a pleasant day, nice evening, or a restful night, wherever you are. Next week, we will talk about very important practice called mindful pause. So right now, after this session, please click the attend button so you'll be sent a notification about our next live session next week. But right now, thank you so much for your presence, and I wish you all the best, and until next time.